Going. Good evening and welcome to the Autonomous Collective. This is the After Hours show. I'm Joe in Norway, and I'm joined by Ann Lee, a retired college professor, community member at the Daily Kos. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Ann.
Hey there.
Yeah, what a week. Still going on. There seems to be a bit of turmoil out there.
Busy week everywhere.
Lots to do. I've had to dust off my 20-year-old pre-Iraq invasion protest banner for the work we'll be doing this weekend.
It is a comment that world peace is not quite there yet.
It seems as if World War I has never really, the Great War is still ongoing.
Indeed.
With the events in Gaza, it's a bit hard to think about filling your belly, but our thoughts go out to people of Gaza suffering. I would like to continue my focus on the Levant this evening in the kitchen. What I'll be making is something called Mujadarra, which is I suppose you could say it's a starch on starch crime, culinary crime, but the economics compels some dishes into existence, like Mujadarra, which is essentially a grain and lentil dish. So it's in this case it's known as poor people's fare. It's very popular throughout the Middle East in both Druze communities, Arab, Muslim, Jewish, Sephardic culture. This dish goes back to Neolithic times even. It's even mentioned in the Bible, although in the Bible it was called the red potage or something like that. And since I was born against, I won't be using red, I'll be using black lentils, specifically beluga, just because they tend to maintain their texture a little bit better and a little bit more flavor. I have some basmati rice, also quite flavorful, which I've pre-soaked. So our focus here, as in most of the time I do my cooking, is saving energy. These are simple vegetarian dishes. I will be employing my trusty old pressure cooker yet again in several different ways. I'll be sauteing first, then pressure cooking the lentils separately because they require more cooking, as rice takes 5 minutes under pressure. These take 8 to 10. So I'll be sauteing. What the Mujadarra is at its simplest, it's lentils, rice, fried onion, and black pepper and salt and olive oil.
Yum.
Maybe a little garnish. So I'll be sauteing the half of the onions, then pressure cooking them with the beans, and then we'll we'll catch up with you, and we'll take it from there. That's the base, of course. I tend to enjoy upgrading dishes or experimenting a little. I'm going to be throwing in some whole cumin in with the lentils as well, and to cheat, since we do this in under an hour typically. We're supposed to caramelize the onions, but what I'm going to do is employ a little cheat here, which I recommend to people. This is a Korean black bean paste. Can be used any fermented black bean paste, either
Yum.
Chinese, Korean. You can even use dark soy sauce. Just a couple dashes of dark soy sauce will infuse the onions. It won't get that deep flavor, but it'll give it a little bit. It'll help caramelize and give it the appearance at least. So we'll be doing a little hack in the kitchen here. So I think did I have everything? Oh, just there was one thing I wanted to mention about the name of the dish in Arabic, Mujadarra, but it means riddled with small holes or pockmarked. And there's a famous Sichuanese dish called pockmarked tofu, otherwise known as mapo tofu, which is from Mother Chen in the Qing Dynasty, from a restaurateur in the Qing Dynasty. But interestingly enough, the first written records of both mapo tofu and Mujadarra were about the same time, early 1200s. So the Book of Dishes, written by al-Baghdadi in 2026, is the first. It's called Kitab al-Tabiq, is the name of the book, in 1226. And in 1250, I believe, was the first documented evidence of mapo tofu. Kind of has a similar. The pockmark came from smallpox on Mother Chen's face. I thought that was a bit interesting. So I'll get to cooking, and I believe you have some updates on the violence besetting the world.
Continuing global violence. Let me see if I can share part of my little screen here, and I hope we can do this simultaneously.
Yep.
Okay, they can still see your cooking, right?
I'm not sure. It doesn't appear so.
Can someone make sure that, can they see both of us?
It looks like, well, on Zoom we can, but let me see. Okay, yeah, I'm showing that. When I speak, I am visible. So we're sharing.
We're sharing a single thing. Then I'll just stop sharing then.
I'll just cough. It's okay. You can do it. I'm just.
I like watching you cook. I assume everyone else does. So anyway, so I'll just start yakking. I had, maps to go along with this, but let's not have maps.
Well, you can do the maps first while I'm just moving the ingredients over and getting ready. I have to sharpen my knife still. So they've seen all that before.
Let's try again. Can everyone see both of us?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. All righty. It's been a long week in Ukraine, even though we've been paying attention more to generally mainstream media in the United States is paying attention to Israel and Gaza. And it is very fraught. As of today, it seems like the tempo of Israeli ground action has ratcheted up a little bit. There have been incursions into the Gaza space by Israeli troops. Several of them, they're brief incursions. They go in and then they retreat back out, and they're accompanied by airstrikes. So that's kind of the nature of Israel Gaza. Fortunately, the Institute for the Study of War also puts out a maps of the current conflict there as well, but it's hard to track relative to the amount of information coming out. But they're doing their best. They're noting when Hamas or related groups are firing into the Israeli territory and vice versa, as well as on the Lebanon and Syrian borders. And so you should go there if you want to see some overall views of it. Mainstream media is covering it fairly well. The problem, of course, is that these have a little lag to them, and the subsequent so-called main battle that may occur, or the main incursion, which is essentially trying to clear the northern part of Gaza, or, well, I suppose, it is the northern, it's probably eastern, I suppose, part of Gaza, and is going to come soon, mainly because of this increase of battle tempo. There have been also interesting, profoundly sad video is now coming out with specifics of people being killed, and some tremendously awful video is currently being shown. So that's kind of my brief report on Israel Gaza. At the end, after my rant, I may show a little bit, or at the end of this little 15 minutes of craziness. Currently, so you can see, partially anyway, I would assume, a map of the current contact line between Ukraine and Russia. So I'm essentially going to, or the Russian occupation of Ukraine, and I'm going to go through the last couple of days. It is a review, but generally this is the main battle area, even though there's probably 10 or 15 points of contact along this long 600 plus mile a length of battle contact. And you can see how, sort of irregular it is, but it has been generally moving forward. That is, some people would like to show you the map and tell you, well, there's not a lot going on because there hasn't been that much movement if you look at the map at fairly large scale. The fact of the matter is that somewhere between 17 to 18% of Ukraine is occupied by Russia. And it has been since 2014. And of course, there's the declaration of independent republics and blah, 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 blah. But the reality, of course, is that since 2014, since the first component of the invasion, there has been a occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory, and it hasn't been the opposite. So that you can say that the mapping at detail, you can see skirmishes, a variety of things, and so the whole week has been a series of attacks by the Russians on a variety of places around Avdiivka, which is near to Donetsk city, which the reality of this is that actually this is very close to the moment where Ukraine may reclaim areas that went into a revolt in 2014. That is, I don't assume, and I don't think anyone would assume that they're going to try and take Donetsk city, rather as compared to Donetsk Oblast, the state. But it is interesting to see how many forces have been mustered into this area. The Russians have been continually losing, although towards the end of this week, the claim is that the Russians are gaining ground. Hard to tell. Essentially, what they took back was a big slag heap, which is the size of a small mountain. And of course, 2 weeks ago, if you were listening to me, the Ukrainians held the top of this little slag heap. It's not so little; it's pretty big. It's a mountain of coal slag, and it's it dominates the area, and so the Russians have may have taken it, but the fact is it's a barren. It has no cover. So if you hold it, you're just going to get attacked constantly, which is what essentially what the Ukrainians did. The Russians put up a Russian flag, and sort of showing that they had sort of captured the flag or whatever, that they held the area. Promptly a couple of hours later, a Ukrainian drone took it out. So it's just like it's not like really taking territory, but it does have a certain prominent view overlooking a variety of industrial areas. So that's kind of the northern end of this Avdiivka area, this salient, I guess you could call it. And so that's generally what's been going on. In other maps, you can sort of see in detail what's going on. This area here that I've just circled is where this slag heap is. And so they've claimed that they've taken a lot of territory, but they've lost a lot of things at the same time. Several hundred vehicles. The casualty rate is very, very high, but they're throwing a lot of, as you can see with these little red boxes, a lot of forces at that area. The scuttlebutt is that Putin wants this Avdiivka taken by December 1st, and of course that's going to be trouble if they just don't take it over. But I think you can imagine there's issues. Anyway, the details are, as I said, this is an important area, this little salient, I suppose, in Avdiivka. And the area that we were just talking about is up by Stepova and Krasnohorivka. And anyway, and you can see with each of these circles that that's kind of what they were looking at here. The slag heap itself is called Terracon, and I assume that's probably because that's the company that essentially named it, but that's kind of what they've been fighting over. There is imagery of it available that it essentially looks like a big kind of volcano-like structure with a kind of depression in the center. But as I said, it has no foliage. There's no cover on this thing. And so in going through the week, there's been just a lot of fighting over this one particular area, which and a variety of other side actions that were interesting. At a week ago, an attack by drones on a air base that is in the so-called safe area, pretty far in. It's it's near the Luhansk airport, and the Ukrainians took out about 5 to reportedly 9 helicopters on the land, and there's aerial photographs, so there's kind of stuff messed up there. So that's kind of interesting to think and look about as well. I do this every night at midnight, and it is a little depressing when you think how many people have died during the day and how much carnage is going on. But that's the nature of a full-scale war. It is, with respect, probably much more brutal than in terms of combat, than the Israeli Gaza situation. On the other hand, the aerial bombardments are pretty much the same as when the Ukraine war began. Now, the other interesting thing about this
Could I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead.
You mean in terms of that has more to do with it's two armies fighting together versus.
That's right. And the terrorism
resistance.
Is essentially, there's a certain kind of asymmetry in the sense that, the Israelis have total air superiority, and they're essentially pummeling buildings and other kinds of structures. and they're claiming that they're avoiding civilians, but civilians are still dying, and we have video evidence of that. And then there's a disinformation camp of my understanding is that at least some aid, there were trucks lined up to try and get over the border, and I think those have been allowed to pass. So I think there is something going
And
through.
just one thing here, one moment. I just want to flavor check. Can that throw in some white powder of umami also to get a little bit of extra flavor? That helps if you don't have all of the
Excellent.
animal ingredients or seasoning. MSG is cheap.
Well, that's sort of the nature of vegan vegetarian food, right? That one does have to complement more spices, I think, with it, right?
That was the lack of fats, basically. I think that
Yes.
has to do a lot.
Yes. Yeah, it's more about flavor, I guess.
Mm.
So let me get
Fat is
back
a flavor conveyor.
let me get back to this. The comparison, I think it's a worthy comparison to compare the two events, because everything is focused on one single area in within Israel and Gaza, as opposed to 600 miles of front and a whole bunch of different conflict areas. And it is true that bombardment is occurring on the Lebanese border and in Syria. Was it yesterday or day before yesterday? The U.S. attacked Syrian locations. Locations in Syria because of missiles coming from the other direction and their attacks on U.S. bases. So there's a variety of activity going on. A U.S. carrier has moved down to the Red Sea to sort of cover the southern flank in case there's some other issues that come up. And it's clear that something else is happening, since cruise missiles were launched from Yemen that got shot down by an American ship. That was 2 weeks ago, but important in this particular context. So that's the kind of difference. The distances are different. The line of contact is much different. It's really focused on a very small area relative to what's being bombarded, whereas there's a lot of bombardment all over the country. Air alerts still continue across the whole of Ukraine, although not that many drones have been sent into Ukraine. And I think that there is some waiting to see how things are going to sort out with this Advika area, to see where that's going to head. And as I was just about to begin, in Kherson, which is the southern line of river along the Dnieper, where recall that the dam got blown up at the top there, so it sort of changed the landscape and created, I can think, a situation of a little bit more marshland in relative to crossing the Dnieper in this area from Kherson City. So there is an attempt, and there has been an advance in that area. And the Russians, as I mentioned last week, didn't quite know what to do about it. I assume that they're going to be sending forces, and this is a large plain. There's no very little coverage of trees or forests or anything like that. So one assumes that there's going to be a lot more action in this particular area. The problem, of course, is simply fording or crossing the Dnieper River, where bridges have been blown up, and there's some pontoon bridges, but it's a kind of complicated situation of what you defend. So that's been the general thing this week. There's been a kind of new front or a new area of operation that has been opened up. There is a this continuing Adika area that has been focused on, with a lot of contact all the way around the area, and some generalized contact across the entire front. The Russian version of this is not that different. in what I look at, I try to look at both the sort of pro-Ukrainian or the Ukrainian point of view, but also the Russians have a fairly detailed, and in fact, because they're invested, as I said, in more disinformation, they tend to, try and build up facts, some of which are not quite accurate, but they overall, they give a certain kind of shape to what the combat area looks like. Needless to say, this is not the only activity. We've recently discovered that severing of the communication and fuel or natural gas link from Estonia to Finland, which we thought was sabotaged by the Russians, may have simply been damaged by a Chinese freighter making a standard sort of error with its anchor. And sort of damaging it by, dragging its anchor chain across the darn thing. It took a lot of work and much investigation to work through that, but that appears that it's not so much a war-related activity. That's not to say that's not a contingency built into the kind of battle plans for the Baltic. And of course, it doesn't help the kind of situation, the war situation in general, in that the Baltics are worry so much now about some kind of incursion from the Russians or from Belarus. This is a graph of U.S. military aid to Ukraine by the month, and you can see that it's not quite as big as in recent months as it has been, but noting, of course, that the U.S. tried to change the nature of its support by trying to put through a very large combined bill tying Ukrainian aid with Israeli aid, and that, of course, has its own problematic elements. I'll get back to this in a moment. How are we doing on that pressure cooker, Joe?
Well, we've got the lentils under pressure. They're doing fine. They're half finished. And I heated up some olive oil, which we're going to fry the onions. This is a quicker way to get crispy onions, get submerge them in olive oil. You can use a similar technique when you're making a Spanish tortilla. You can cook the potatoes, and I use a little bit of onion. You par cook the potatoes in oil, and makes them nice and velvety, smooth, and par cooks them. In this case, we're going to be heating these up with the lid on to try to steam and fry all at the same time. We'll add a little salt towards the end to season them. But we'll just let this go. It can sit and not forget it, but keep an eye on it. Check it every once in a while. And then the lentils will be done in a little bit. Then we'll get ready to mix it with the rice. And we'll be cooking it with some lemon rind, and I might throw in some extra spices. I'm not sure. Maybe cinnamon, maybe allspice, maybe something else. I'm not sure yet. That's where we stand.
Good.
Now.
Yum. I'm hungry again.
Oh, the onions smell lovely.
It's nothing more wonderful than that. All right, let me answer some questions that Anna asked some questions, important questions, ones that actually have come up recently. Well, the integration of Wagner troops, that is, since they killed, or since Prigozhin died, whatever, and Wagner got disassembled, much of their command structure did go into the regular Russian army. They are probably in the same location. So essentially, it's the Russian army ordering prison conscripts into battle to die. Then and so that is that's going to be a continuing issue. the ISW has mentioned that several times, but it's kind of, it's really, the Russians have a really complicated time. They have Chechen guys they're using, and it relative to their own other kinds of issues that has its own set of problems. And it would be, and to answer your other question, I think that it's certainly clear that the U.S. could be helping to deliver humanitarian aid in a much better way, but I think that they're holding off relative to the completion of whatever this this invasion mission is going to be. I think they're going to step in a very serious way once Israel suddenly decides it's going to stop combat operation. But I think I think there's a leash somewhere, because I don't think that the Israelis want to have 300,000 mobilized troops for that long relative to the operation of their economy, if nothing else. So that's kind of where that is. It is an interesting problem on the question of humanitarian aid. Now, humanitarian aid is much more complicated because of the issues of non-governmental organizations and the kind of regular stream that the UN and other elements are involved in. So that's another interesting kind of problem. We go back to Ukraine and to suggest, and I think if you can see this little diagram here, this is where the general attack is going on. It's kind of focused, and it is using special operations troops largely. Or at least led by that. And then in the same little other kind of weird salient down near Robotyne, is still going on. It is a little bit back and forth. There was a recent attack against one of Ukraine's in the center, one of the central regions nuclear power plants. Ukraine has a bunch of them. There was some damage to at least outbuildings at that location. So there is this sort of lingering in the background attacks on the Ukrainian grid that are probably going to come up again. That is, and it was fairly effective the last time that the Russians tried to do that. That is attacking the electrical grid that supports the railways. Those kinds of things are, probably still on a target list. But on the other hand, today's news is that there's been a noticeable lack, and it could be for a variety of reasons, but there's a series of long-range bombers. I think there's Tu-95s, Bear Foxtrots, that have been used to launch certain types of cruise missiles into Ukraine from the Russian side, and they haven't been in operation for a month. The British, the UK's Ministry of Defense has noted that they have been operating for a while, and it may signify, and of course they don't want to admit how much they really do know, that the kind of cruise missiles that are launched from those particular bombers, they're in shorter supply than we thought. And that's a kind of interesting issue relative to, these are really old airplanes, as old or older than B-52s. And of course, the other issue is that the Ukrainians have had an interesting set of plans along with sabotage to knock out some of these bases that are far inside of Russia. More recently, there have been other contacts in the Kherson region. But as I said, there's the reporting of it is really complicated because the Russian military will tell you that in their reporting in social media that they're always going to be successful, and that there are always these, and in some ways it just may simply be, they're under the gun, as it were, to report progress, and they have to make it kind of more public in that particular context. So, you have to sort of take it with a little bit of skepticism or large grains of salt from the salt mines. I'm showing here a map of the total map of drone attacks by Ukraine on Russia in Russian territory. You can see kind of what they're doing here. Needless to say, this isn't a lot of contact, whereas the Russians send this stuff in pretty much daily. So there is a difference in, I think the Ukrainians are really much more strategic about these applications. Needless to say, this is the whole week. Here's a picture of the of this heap, as it were, the Terracon. And this is the overhead look, and you can see that, essentially it's just a very large slag pile, a very large one, with a major road going through it. There have been a lot of interesting reports, peripheral reports relative to the continuing Russian indoctrination of the children that they've stolen, essentially, or kidnapped. The numbers are kind of weird, continue to be kind of weird, only because the accuracy of it is a little difficult. And so we get those reports every week. They report it every week, and I think it's just going to have to be sorted out, and it's going to take years to sort out relative to children being kidnapped. Sorry for that little beep there. And so anyway, that's what we're currently up to speed in that particular context. Tonight's little work will be a joke about the Sudetenland, a commentary on those Tu-95s. The Russian strikes are sort of tapering off a little bit. Compared to that will be the recent update of a lot more Russian officers that have been killed in Ukraine, and the command structure always gets affected by these matters. And that there is a kind of problem with the organization of Russian troops. They do not have as many, and it's probably by design, aside from some other issues, of non-commissioned officers. So this is why they're not as well organized relative to attacks, et cetera. So anyway, that's that little story. And I will begin now with my little rant. Oh, let me show you some Iranian images here, and then I'll start my rant. There were a few attacks. This gives you the sense of some sort of rocket attacks over the entire region, including Iraq. This is from the Institute for the Study of War, or the Critical Threats site. This is the one about indirect fire attacks into Israel from yesterday from Gaza. You can sort of see what they're a lot more short distance stuff. There is a mapping of attacks into northern Israel from Syria and Lebanon. They're not as updated, and mainly because the reporting is a little sparse. And also some people don't like revealing all the positions of things. So there was a rumor that a IDF helicopter got brought down, and there's no particular evidence of that yet, but that's sort of interesting. And there is a claim by Hamas that they've taken out 24 Israeli tanks, and that's you need a little bit more evidence of whether that occurred or not. There isn't a lot of evidence supporting that particular claim, but it's an interesting claim. Now, my rant. A third-term Minnesota representative, member of Congress, Democratic Party, a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. His name is Dean Phillips, and he's actually the first Democrat for his particular region in something like 50 years. It's because he represents a region that is generally the richer West Minneapolis suburbs. These are the generally richer suburbs. Edina, Minnetonka, if you ever can remember any of those kind of name. But it is it's west of the Mall of America. Let's put it that way. The interesting thing is, of course, that he's a third term. He's a millionaire, multimillionaire. His mother married into a large liquor distribution company, and Phillips is the liquor company. and he's branched off into, I think he owns 2 coffee shops and some other things in Minneapolis. Anyway, he is a multimillionaire, went to prep school in that same suburban region and went to Brown as an undergraduate. So I think there is a kind of sense of, whatever his position is, it represents a certain set of relations. Also, the fact is that he's more of a centrist. However, if you compared him, for example, with Liz Cheney voted with Trump 93% of the time when she was in Congress. Dean Phillips votes 100% behind Biden. So, there's no opposition there relative to that. And it is from the problem solvers' point of view that this problem solvers caucus has a group, a couple of whom were interested in becoming Speaker of the House, but largely they always folded relative to the voting with the GOP. So, and essentially all their on-the-air presence was to whine about how the Democrats weren't being bipartisan enough to help they're putting some really horrible people in place, and it still happened anyway, which is kind of what we were expecting at the beginning. Anyway, Dean Phillips, Democrat from Minnesota, has decided to run for president. Now, the question is, why do you want to do this? That there's been a whole business about trying to, support, to maintain solidarity behind Biden. But, there's these little things, there's little themes that are kind of designed pretty much for the first primary, that is for New Hampshire. Now, Minnesota is pretty far from New Hampshire, and it was interesting to see that from wherever they were getting this little bus is to do the campaigning in New Hampshire. Originally, it said "Make America Affordable Again" was the little slogan that was on the side of the lower side of this bus. And it didn't go well. A lot of people on Twitter sort of mocked that. And I would mock it certainly simply because it resembles MAGA, and to, parrot a Republican line is kind of, well, I would say not only centrist, but dumb if you wanted Democratic votes. So it got changed in the couple of days that it took to get to from wherever it started to up through Ohio and a bunch of other things to New Hampshire. It now reads, "It's time for change." So it's a little more, I would say moderate, let's put it that way, and less Trump-like. But it is kind of weird that they actually changed the bus slogan at that kind of level as well. The way he describes himself on his Twitter headline or banner is normally affable, non-kooky, eternal optimist. This is Phillips on the way he self-describes himself: radical pragmatist, common sense enthusiast, and bipartisan believer. Well, that's, I suppose, okay. But if you're in the problem solvers caucus in the House, you also are slightly connected to the No Labels group, which is trying to run its own party candidates in the 2024 election. So one could say that, well, maybe he's doing this for some other kind of reason, although he said that he will support the nominee of the Democratic Party, et cetera. So, and his ad is kind of weird. If you watch his ad, which is on Twitter, it talks about, how he spent his summers at summer camps because you can afford it in New Hampshire, and that he really loves New Hampshire for X number of reasons, whitewater rafting, blah, blah, blah.
Live free or die.
Yeah. It is that kind of stuff. And then he mentions guns. He learned how to shoot a gun in New Hampshire. So he's trying to suck up on the one hand to the gun owners in New Hampshire who are, live free or die and all that shit. but on the other hand, as I pointed out in my little piece in Daily Kos, he mentions guns when New Hampshire has already sent a helicopter and a SWAT team, among other things, to find that spree killer in Maine. So it's, it breaks both ways, being for and against guns. Now, he took money in 2019 from the GOP mega donor and, of course, the buddy of Clarence Thomas, Harlan Crow. And the guy who's building this campaign, perhaps because he doesn't have anything better to do, but there's some reason, and it's probably money, Steve Schmidt. And if you recall who Steve Schmidt is or was, largely a GOP supporter, although he is affiliated with the Lincoln Project. The deal is, of course, that that Steve Schmidt gave us Sarah Palin, and as we recall, this is a kind of a weird little fact, along with the Harlan Crow donation of $3,000 to the Cornel West campaign, which Cornel West returned. I don't know whether Dean Phillips is going to return the 2,000 something or other dollars to Harlan Crow, but since it's from 2019 anyway. And when a reporter asked him about that today, he kind of demurred and said, well, I'm not taking any PAC money and blah, 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 which all sounds very well and good. But there was a moment, and he copped to it, that he did, fundraise for his campaigns in a big way, and took in a lot of, a certain kind of money. So anyway, that's, hopefully he won't remind us that he wanted to make America affordable again necessarily, and however depth-filled that might be. So anyway, Steve Schmidt is sort of running his campaign, and as I said, I suppose at one level he was very successful with making Sarah Palin a vice presidential candidate. Needless to say, Dean Phillips is that kind of guy. I think he sounds reasonable in one sense, but that's kind of the whole deal. Anyway, that's my little rant here. And my final part of the rant is, of course, what it did was remind me that there were equivalent parties in, and not to make a false equivalency here, but I made the comment that Harlan Crow is the George Soros of Fritz Thyssens. Now, you may not remember who Fritz Thyssens is, but he was the guy at the end of the Weimar Republic who controlled something like 70% of the iron ore resources of Germany. He was in control of the steel industry, and Thyssen Steel is essentially what built up the German army for World War II. So when you think of Harlan Crow, I hope that you would think about Fritz Thyssens, that there were, and this is the argument that many people have is, well, it was voters who put Hitler in power. And well, no, it wasn't. And it was a, minority or a relatively small block of voting relative to the, election, quote unquote, or the succession of Hitler and the end of the Weimar Republic. But there were capitalists involved, and one of them was this guy Fritz, who supported and really put a lot of money in at the front end. But of course, as the war went on, he decided that he wasn't in favor of the Nazis anymore. So by after the war, he dies in 1951. But at the end of the war, he was he did wind up being incarcerated for a little while they were trying to sort out, who are the real or the unreal Nazis were. So that is a certain interesting part of that. And there are
during the Nuremberg trials.
Yes. I was just referring to the Nuremberg trials. But the point is, of course, that at the front end, he was a big supporter and put in a lot of money in the early, the election campaigns for the National Socialists. So, and I'm not saying Harlan Crow is a Nazi. I just think he's got a lot of money and he's touring around in places that are pretty strange. Okay, so that's pretty much my yammering. I assume there are a couple of questions in the
I hope so, because I've got to keep an eye on the browning onions. They're nearly done, and they could quickly
Yum.
burn to a crisp.
Oh, I note that yes, Sank and I can't pronounce his name. The guy from Young Turks, Sank Uyghur.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's running for president. I don't know why. I think it's to make money.
As a Democrat?
I assume. God only knows. I mean, if you know, if his run for Congress is at any example, this is going to be a big failure. He got less than 20% of the vote in his run for Congress in his area.
Okay, just an update on cooking. We've got the lentils are par cooked. I drain them, put the rice back in the pressure cooker, the lentils. I have the same measure that I used for the rice, which I'll take the stock from the lentils. Put that back in. Sear it about. Put some parsley in there. Maybe some, oh, we've got some allspice. That looks good. To a boil. Some lemon zest in there. Now we can, it's up to you. This can take 15 minutes to steam. If we just leave our pressure cooker without putting it under, just like this, sealed with the lid, this will take 15 minutes on, this is an induction top. It'll go down to number 3 for 15 minutes. Otherwise, if we want to put it on pressure, lock and load, wait till it comes up, and then takes 5 minutes and it's finished. Oh, well, better check on our onions. They're looking about done.
Well, I suppose I can keep ranting about
oh, please do.
third party running. You know, I neglected to mention, of course, that Marianne Williamson is also running, such as it is. And of course, there's Cornel West, relative to a kind of third party run with the Green Party.
I thought Cornell dropped out. Didn't he drop out?
Not that I recall. I think he's still at it. He did return his money, the Harlan Crow's money, but I think he's still at work.
Okay. I must have misread something.
I think we're gonna get a libertarian candidate probably at some point, and in this, it's unfortunate that they do have a certain amount of, as I keep pointing out, in prior elections, trying to blame the Green Party for, you know, the Libertarian Party actually had more votes in certain places like Michigan. So people need to get that sense. Nancy.
Well, she might need to be unmuted.
Well, let me see if I can.
Oh, I could try. Oh, I got the pressure. You're gonna have to get it. Oh.
Okie dokie. Nancy?
5 minutes.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
So I saw this Dean Phillips was interviewed. I don't remember what station or network, whatever. So he said he thinks Joe Biden has done a great job, but we need young people come into the process, and that he hopes other people will. But the thing is, as I understand it, Joe Biden has declined to be on the ballot in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire is not the first state now in the primaries, but so apparently Phillips is angling to be on the ballot in New Hampshire, where he could win the primary if others aren't on the ballot, obviously. So how might that play into this?
Well, I think there are a lot of old people involved, and some of us old people remember McCarthy's challenge of LBJ, and probably other kinds of challenges, Ted Kennedy and Carter, et cetera. So, people think that if you can deliver a defeat in New Hampshire, that might change people's minds. But as I said, I agree with you that Biden not being on the ballot sort of makes it a moot point.
Well, is it too late? It might be too late for him to get on the ballot now, I suppose. It's coming up
I don't
pretty
know.
soon.
I don't know whether today was the deadline for filing papers. I mean, certainly Trump made a big deal of it, last week to file his papers for the.
Yeah. But in any case, that's what Dean Phillips said. It was that he wanted other people to get into the primaries. And that's what Cenk Uygur was saying, was that he actually approached politicians that he knows and implored them to get into the primaries, and nobody would do it. Nobody would challenge Joe Biden. So, but also Cenk Uygur has a book that just came out. So
there you go.
I suspect he was since he's going to be on a book tour anyway, why not run for president?
There you go.
Anyway, so I see Larry has his hand up.
Larry.
He probably has to be unmuted too.
He has to unmute himself.
Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I was curious, with Gaza, we're, I guess, going to be sending money there for military aid. Is it what's the impact? How's it going to be split with Ukraine? Is it going to be any impact there? And then
well,
also,
there was the mentioning of that some artillery shells went to Israel instead of Ukraine, but I think that was simply a sort of an attempt to show that there was equal interest. That's all. I don't think the Israelis are hurting for artillery shells. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. Because it's not like we have an unlimited amount of military aid that we're giving, right? It's going to be split somehow, I guess.
The annual amount is $2 billion that we give to them.
To Israel, I thought it was $4 billion a year.
Yeah, maybe it is. I always recall the $2 billion as an annual, whatever.
The other thing I was thinking is, what would this, would what's happening in Gaza have? What do the Russians think? Things like that. Does it have any bearing on the war in Ukraine?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, I think it does in the sense that any diversion of attention to Israel, it works in the Russians' favor. And the Russians, obviously, because of their connections to Iran, want this to happen. It just helps their general overall position to weaken, they want to weaken alliances. They want to, cause trouble. I mean, they have personal vested interests, right? There's the Syrian naval base that the Russians occupy. So it would be sort of interesting, to see that get included in the problem. But obviously, no one's going to go there yet.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, no one will talk about that little naval base, but I assume they have assets there as well.
Yeah, that makes me think of, so that river area, rivers are sort of like these natural barriers, right? And now that barrier has become a marshland.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of more of a barrier, right?
Indeed. I mean, it's not completely dry, but it also, it has its own issues, let's put it that way. And it makes it bad for both sides. I mean, it's harder to defend. It's, whatever. Easier to send in, irregular troops or special operations forces. And there has been a variety of interchanges, but there's not a lot of description of the interactions between, they don't talk about how many vehicles they blew up or whatever. So that this is kind of vague what's going on. And it's been that vague probably since the Ukrainians took back Kherson on the north side, on the right-hand side of the river.
What? Yeah. So when you had that, the set of numbers about Russian, officers, I guess, were killed, and I was like, wow, that's surprising that they had that level of detail about, the other side. And,
well,
so there's got to be a high level of data on some of these things, right?
Well, the reporting data is interesting because a lot of people, whether it's open source intelligence or whatever, have spent a fair amount of time tracking funerals and death notices. So, if you're a guy you're an officer from Siberia, and you happen to get killed, there is actually someone looking at local Siberian death notices and noticing that an officer has been delivered back and is going to be buried on whatever, have a funeral on whatever day, Now, and seriously, that is what's going on. That is how a lot of people have been trying to track relatives and the regular Russian citizens have been sort of caught up in that as well, relative to not being told, where their loved ones have gone.
Yeah, it would seem like with that level of detail, doing some number crunching could, help you see into the future a bit, I would think.
Well, yes. I mean, that's true. And, remember at the front end of the war, there was disinformation about crunching up bodies in mobile crematoria at the beginning of the war. That you recall this, right? That the Russians had a whole bunch of, these portable crematoriums that you could bring out into the field and sort of, not worry about sending bodies home. I'm sure you keep the details, but and who knows what that story is.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Ann. I wanted, you mentioned Steve Schmidt, and he was this Republican operative, I believe also a never Trumper who spent a lot of time on MSNBC.
Indeed.
I just wanted to say that I generally don't pronounce the M in his last name. I just think it's more indicative of his character. But regarding this Dean, oh, you can't hear me?
No, this is, I'm having a conversation with
Oh,
Joe.
I'm sorry. Regarding this Dean character from Minnesota who's running for the Democratic nomination, do you think he's doing that just in case Biden dies or something before the election?
I think that's what every person who is, running is thinking about, at least one in one way or another. I'm sorry to say that, but
Yeah.
there'll be this massive scramble if something happens. On the other hand, I think Biden probably eats better than Trump, if nothing else.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The Cenk Uygur, I mean, that's not a serious thing. I think it's just a book promotion. He was born in Turkey, so he is not eligible to be president of the United States.
No, but he can claim that he can want to run or something and file no papers, of course, but simply make some weird claim. I mean, where the rubber meets the road is whether he's going to actually try to file, or sue to file, for example, from a constitutional point of view in New Hampshire. But what's it? There's the guy who runs every time during the presidential election. What's his name? Vermin Supreme, or the guy who wears the fishing boot on the top of his head.
Oh, you think it's his it's his
No,
turn?
I mean he files every time, so I assume that Cenk should file. All comers.
All comers, yes. Well, thank you very much.
What? Twilight Zone in 20 minutes. Are we going to get?
Are you able
Twilight
to hear me?
Zone? Now I can.
Oh, finally. Been talking to myself over here. All right,
Sorry.
first let's go back to Biden. I got questions. All right, first, first things first. The rice is done. It's 5 minutes way over. I should have cooked it for not on pressure for the 15 minutes. We would have been fine with all of that. There we go. So we've got
Nice.
rice and lentils, Mujadarra. The rice is perfectly cooked and the lentils have not exploded into mush. So
Good. Excellent.
we just fluff it up. We can put some of the onions in there.
Yum.
Parsley. Some lemon juice for freshness. Now, Nancy mentioned Biden not being on the ballot in
New
New
Hampshire.
Hampshire. Why is that? Why would he not be?
Well, he's not. He doesn't have to be on the
It's
ballot.
safe?
Well,
Is
no,
that-
I mean, it's a rule thing, but he doesn't necessarily have to file. I mean, relative to, I think it's a technical detail, but relative to party processes, I'm sure there's a thing that allows you to, sort of collect delegates on toto without having to necessarily run in a primary. And besides, they still have super delegates, I think, right? The party still has that thing that they use to sort of suppress the rest of the delegate votes. John can probably answer that question better than I can, but I would assume that the same party processes from 2016 are in place. And we all know how that worked out.
Regarding Israel, it's typically $3 billion a year, but since Ukraine, I think it jumped up to $4 billion a year from the U.S.
Not surprising.
And that's just above the table. We don't know what kind of black funding and
black budgets. I mean, I mean, that the whole question of, you know, they bought all these F-35s and all the avionics are Israeli avionics. You know, it's kind of, there's all this weird stuff going on that we don't really have some accountability for, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes, right?
Now, I shouldn't have done it under pressure because the rice did get clumpy. The pressure is a little too strong for basmati, but it works fine. But we have a little steam.
So does basmati get sticky at that with this kind of pressure cooking?
Well, again, this is a starch on starch culinary crime, so you will have that issue. Normally, the basmati is not that sticky at all. It'd be loose flakes. So I did it earlier in the week with no pressure, and I wanted to test it out under pressure. And definitely, it's better without pressure. So just cook the lentils under pressure, and you're best deal. But,
excellent.
Traditional dish shared by all of the different peoples in the Levant, and we're hoping we can just all get along at some point here. They had for thousands of years prior, relatively speaking.
I don't know.
It's like a mixture. But
I don't know. Well, you've got one side that's being fairly well funded, and the other side is digging up water pipes to make rockets. So, you know, whatever.
So tomorrow, after hours, I'll be going on not a protest, but outreach, solidarity. We have the Palestine Committee of Norway has a stand in the center of town where people gather around and basically engage citizens. So we'll be there for about 2 hours tomorrow at, I believe you'll have to check the schedule, 5:30 in the morning, Eastern. And then at 3 o'clock my time, which 3 hours after that, we'll be going to a church on a further island where local Palestinians will be talking about news that they've got from relatives, seeing what we can do to help. One of the members of the committee will also be talking about their recent trip that they made to the occupied territories in September, the other month. And we're hoping that the ambassador to Palestine will arrive, but we're not sure. Their schedule's a bit, obviously,
very exciting.
up in the air now. Yeah.
Very
so
exciting.
I'll stream as much as is relevant or interesting for people, if anybody's awake at that time. And I'm not sure to what extent it'll be a lot of Norwegian. It'll probably be a mixture of English, Norwegian, Arabic. We'll see. But everybody's welcome to join if they.
Exciting. Our schedule is an interesting one this weekend. Ballybox on Saturday is going to do its Halloween show, which is very exciting. Always very exciting, actually. Interesting things always happen. The writers' workshop will be on tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, I think. So there's that. Be sure to come to the Autonomous Collective website, Autonomous Collective, theautonomouscollective.net. Sunday will be the beginning in Weekly Marks at 3 o'clock on the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844, preceded by Hammer and Sickle, I think will be on prior to that. And after that, at 5 o'clock will be after weekly marks at 3. At 5 o'clock there will be Colombo. Following us tonight, there is going to be in a little bit, and you should join us in the Autonomous Collective, so we get build the audience for the Twilight Zone, which will start in a couple of minutes, actually. 14 minutes from now, we're hoping to do Twilight Zone. Later on, after that will be you bring the news if you have stuff you want to read, so that to share with us, so that we can have a running conversation. And my understanding is the safety meeting tonight with the Venture Brothers is going to be at midnight, so that's going to be exciting as well. I think I've covered most of the things in the schedule. What time is your Palestine event going to kind of be around?
We'll be out on the street at 5:30 a.m. bright and bushy tailed. So if there's anybody still up, check in. And then at 9 a.m. we'll have the meeting, which will probably be a lot more interesting. Unless you like street brawls. So could get hairy out there. We've got a very outspoken contingent of pensionist Zionists, Christian Zionists here. They're very vocal.
That should be pretty amusing. Lots of yelling. There'll be lots of yelling. Let's put it that way.
There was last week.
All righty. That's what we're doing that. So
all right.
We're coming to an end here. Come join us. We want to build this thing. I mean, we've got a fair number of people, but not everyone's here at the same time, and we really, need to have more of these things sort of come together. And as I said, there's interesting things happening. I'm actually looking forward to the if you can get the Palestinian ambassador there tomorrow, that should be really a kind of interesting moment, considering how busy everything is and how much is going on at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Take care.